Okay, for today's lesson, you are going to need to have a copy of this handout right here that is linked above or below, possibly. It's called the genre notes. You can download it and type into this, or you can print it and handwrite, or you can even just recreate the chart on a separate sheet of notebook paper, whatever works best for you. But we're going to use this sheet as I go through this PowerPoint, and we're going to fill out things as we go. All right. So when we read as part of our comprehension toolbox, we have to have a purpose for reading. There's purposes come in many forms. You can have the author's purpose, and that can be different than the reader's purpose. Because as a writer, I might write something so that I can persuade someone or so that I can inform them. But your purpose as a reader might be you just want to be entertained, or you just only have time for 5 minutes worth of reading. So you pick something quick and easy. So the reader's purposes differ widely. It might just be because you like the cover, or a friend recommended it. Those are your purposes as a reader. But writer's purposes or author's purposes really fall into the realm of genre. Okay. And when we talk about genre, we're talking about literally 7 different purposes. That is all, just 7. The first one is for literary nonfiction. Okay, so on your handout, this is the title of the genre, literary nonfiction. The purpose for this is to gain information or insight. Okay, so if I'm a writer and I'm writing literary nonfiction, my goal is to get you to put yourself in my shoes because I have lived through this. That is what literary nonfiction is. It is a true story that is told by someone who lived through it so that you can feel what I felt. And the reader's demands for that are 1, to read from beginning to end, because really my story doesn't have as much of an impact if you don't know it all, right? From the very beginning when it started all the way up until the end where something big happened or I learned a lesson, or really you have to have the whole thing to get into my shoes. And then I have to also be able to remember important factual information, because if I lived through concentration camps in World War II, you're going to need to know that that was World War II and that there were Nazis and what maybe some of the names of the camps were, and what part of the country I was in. Those are facts that you might need to know as a reader. If I lived through the 9/11 attacks, you might need to know times and specific dates and different roles that were played. Okay. So all of those facts kind of add to the understanding that I have of the text. The next one is fiction. Now, the purpose of fiction is simply to be entertained. So if I'm writing fiction, all I want to do is entertain you. That's the whole goal. And I want you to read from beginning to end because there may be some plot twists. There may be some characters that come out of nowhere that do interesting things. So I want you to get the whole story because that's what's fun about it, is that entertainment piece of getting to the end and going, oh, wow, that was a good story. The second reader's demand is you have to be able to follow the plot. And if you've ever watched a movie and gotten to the end and been like, I have no idea, like what just happened? Was that, and usually those kinds of movies were like, they're not that good, right? They got confusing in the middle. Things didn't connect well. So as a reader, I want the plot to make sense. But as the writer, I have to be able to write it so that you can follow it, or and that you can make the connections on your own. So we have to be able to follow that plot development. As the writer, I also have to make sure that you understand the relationships between the different things of the plot, between the characters and the settings. If I'm bouncing from place to place to place, or if I'm bouncing in time, and you can't you don't know that's happening, it's going to confuse you. So we've got to be able to make those connections between characters and setting. All of those relationships have to make sense. Also, as a writer, I have to be able to show you that those jumps in time. So if I flash back to the past, I've got to be able to find a way to get you to understand that we went backwards, right? Same thing in a movie. They'll do this with maybe lighting or colors. Sometimes they do it with music. Or maybe even just like I think of Wayne's World. If y'all are too young to know that movie, maybe, but they do this like blah, 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 blah thing to go to the flashback so that it triggers you. You know that that's what they're doing. The same with foreshadowing. If, I have a character who is seeing the future or predicting the future, or, I've got to be able to show you in some way. And as a reader, you have to be able to follow those things in order to understand what is happening. Otherwise, you're just confused. And then finally, as a reader, you have to be able to make the connection to the message or the lesson. Because if you've ever read a book or watched a movie where you kind of missed the point, you get to the end and that's not going to be your favorite movie. You're probably not going to recommend it to someone else because you missed it somewhere. So it's kind of got to be, as a writer, I've got to make it obvious enough, but not so obvious that you're like, duh, I understood that a long time ago. Okay. So that is the purpose of fiction. Next comes persuasive or argumentative. They're one and the same. It just depends on who you're talking to as to which word they use. Star is starting to lean more towards using the word argumentative. So that just for future reference. The purpose of persuasive / argumentative is for the writer, one, to make a decision on a side. The writer always picks a side. They may bring up the other side, but it's just to like throw them down and stomp on them, essentially. They are going to choose a side. And you, as a reader, have to make a decision as well. Are you going to believe that writer and choose their side, or are you going to go the opposite way? Okay, so argumentative is all about making those decisions. As a reader, you have to be able to recognize the difference between facts and opinions. You also have to take into consideration perspective, okay? So if I'm a teacher and I'm writing about education and I'm trying to convince you that, I don't know, homework is a good thing and that kids should always do homework, well, my perspective is going to be skewed a little bit. I'm a teacher. Of course I want homework, right? It would be a completely different paper if I were a student. And so you have to keep that into consideration. You also have to consider bias. I may decide that the dress code is horrible and it needs to be thrown out because maybe it's because I have a student who I know is hard to, is a picky dresser and they only like this certain kind of style and I like them. So I want them to be able to wear whatever they want. Well, my bias is skewed a little bit because I like that person. If I were if I were looking at a student that I didn't like and they wanted to break dress code, my perspective may be a little bit more negative. So it's one of those things where we have to, as the reader, figure out where the writer is coming from and keep that kind of in the back of our head as we read, because that may help us make that decision one way or the other. And that's where number 2 comes in. We have to be able to evaluate and judge the logic of their argument. Are they being logical? Are they being fair? Or is it a whole lot of opinion? And is it based on the fact that they like that topic or that person or whoever they're supporting? You guys have to be the judge as the reader. As the writer, we also have to judge whether our argument is logical. And if it's not, maybe we need to rethink it or come at it in a different way. And then finally, determine feasibility. This is believability. Does your argument make enough sense that I can act upon it, essentially? Or is it so crazy and outlandish that it would never happen? These are the things that we have to think about when we read and write persuasively. All right, I'm going to continue this discussion and our notes in another video because